The morning sun rose over New Geneva's golden wheat fields just like it had for the past 30 years since humans first settled this world. Farmers were already working their land, children were walking to school, and the spaceport hummed with the quiet activity of another peaceful day. 3 million people lived simple lives on this agricultural colony, growing food that fed dozens of human worlds across the sector. None of them saw the shadows falling across their sky until it was too late. Admiral Rex Corvin watched from his flagship as the Galactic Coalition fleet dropped out of hyperspace above the defenseless human world. Hundreds of warships materialized in perfect formation, their weapons already charging for the attack. The reptilian Vex officers on his bridge hissed with satisfaction, while the insectoid Mantic soldiers clicked their mandibles in anticipation. "Begin the demonstration," Rex commanded, his voice cold and mechanical through the translation device. The Coalition had grown tired of human expansion into what they considered their rightful territory. These mammals had spread too far, grown too bold, and needed to learn their place in the galactic order. The first missiles struck New Geneva's orbital defense platforms before any warning could be broadcast. The small human garrison fought bravely, but uselessly against overwhelming odds. Their ships were destroyed within minutes, their crews vaporized in the vacuum of space. The planet below had no military vessels, no weapons capable of reaching orbit, nothing but farms and cities full of innocent people. "Target the population centers," Rex ordered. "Make sure every human world sees what happens to those who defy the Coalition." The bombardment began at exactly noon local time. Plasma beams lanced down from orbit, turning entire city blocks into molten craters. Children playing in parks were vaporized instantly. Hospitals and schools disappeared in brilliant flashes of superheated destruction. The capital city of New Geneva burned like a torch visible from orbit. Tom Bradley was working in his wheat field when the sky caught fire. The farmer looked up to see streaks of light falling like deadly rain across the horizon. His house, where his wife Mary was preparing lunch, vanished in a pillar of flame that reached toward the heavens. His children, playing by the river just minutes before, were gone without even ash to mark where they had been. He fell to his knees in the burning field and screamed at the alien ships above. His voice was lost in the roar of destruction, but his rage was infinite. The attack continued for 6 hours. Coalition forces methodically destroyed every major population center on New Geneva. Refugee camps were targeted specifically to ensure maximum suffering. Hospital ships trying to evacuate. The wounded were shot down without mercy. By evening, 3 million human lives had been reduced to smoke and memory. Rex broadcast the massacre across Coalition space as planned. The footage showed human cities burning, survivors fleeing in terror, and the complete helplessness of the human military. It was meant to demonstrate Coalition power and break human morale across every colony world. "Let this be a lesson to all who challenge the rightful order," Rex announced to the cameras. "Humanity's expansion ends now. Surrender your outer colonies or watch them burn like New Geneva." The transmission reached human space within hours through the quantum communication network. Military commanders, government officials, and civilian leaders across dozens of worlds watched their people die in real time. They saw children running from falling fire, families torn apart by orbital bombardment, and the complete destruction of everything they had built. But something unexpected happened as the footage spread. Instead of surrender messages, human military channels exploded with a different kind of communication. Fleet commanders who had never spoken to each other began coordinating. Independent merchant captains offered their ships for military service. Civilian populations demanded not surrender, but war. Admiral Kate Morrison received the New Geneva footage while reviewing routine patrol reports in her office on Mars. She was a career military officer who had spent 40 years keeping the peace in human space. Her ships had always been used for exploration and defense, never conquest or revenge. She had believed in diplomacy, in finding peaceful solutions to conflicts. She watched the footage 3 times before making her decision. Within An hour, she had activated Protocol Omega, a theoretical war plan that existed only in classified files. Every human military asset in known space received the same message simultaneously. There would be no negotiation, no diplomatic solution, and no mercy. The coalition had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The response was immediate and universal. Human fleets began moving toward coalition space from every direction. Merchant vessels reported to military bases for weapons installation. Civilian shipyards switched to warship production. The entire human infrastructure, built over decades of peaceful expansion, transformed into a weapon of unimaginable scope. Tom Bradley pulled himself from the ashes of New Geneva 3 days after the attack. He was one of fewer than 10,000 survivors on a world that had housed 3 million people. Coalition ground forces had landed to establish an occupation base, expecting broken humans ready for enslavement. Instead, they found something that would haunt their nightmares. The survivors had spent 3 days burying their dead and planning revenge. They attacked the coalition base with farming tools, industrial equipment, and pure hatred. Most died in the assault, but they destroyed the base and killed every alien. Soldier Tom was among the few who lived long enough to see the human fleet arrive 2 weeks later. He stood in the ruins of his home and watched human warships fill the sky like avenging angels. The ships that landed were not rescue vessels but troop transports full of Marines whose eyes burned with the same rage he carried. "We saw the footage," the Marine commander told him simply. "The whole galaxy is going to remember New Geneva." The coalition had wanted to teach humanity about power through fear and destruction. They had succeeded beyond their wildest dreams, but not in the way they intended. New Geneva had not broken. Human will but forged it into something terrible and unstoppable. 3 million innocent people had died to teach the galaxy that humans were dangerous when peaceful, but absolutely deadly when provoked. The coalition would learn this lesson in blood and fire across 100 worlds, but by then it would be far too late to matter. The age of human expansion was over. The age of human conquest had begun. The cargo freighter Endless Bounty drifted through hyperspace carrying medical supplies to coalition colonies on the rim. Captain Vex had made this run countless times, hauling everything from food to weapons across an empire that stretched between the stars. His crew of 20 aliens from various species considered the route completely safe. Protected by coalition naval patrols and the vast distances of space itself, they were wrong about safety, and they were about to learn why. The ship dropped out of hyperspace at the designated nav point, expecting to find empty space and a clear run to their destination. Instead, they found a human vessel waiting for them like a patient spider in its web. The alien ship was small, barely registering on their sensors, but something about its presence made Vex's skin crawl with instinctive fear. Dr. Lisa Park commanded the converted research vessel Scientific Method from her cramped bridge. She had been a xenobiologist before New Geneva, studying alien life forms with the fascination of someone who believed all species could coexist peacefully. The destruction of her research station and the murder of her colleagues had taught her that some species only understood violence. Her ship still carried the equipment she had once used to study alien biology, but now she used that knowledge for a different purpose. She knew exactly how coalition species breathed, what chemicals were toxic to their systems, and which frequencies disrupted their nervous systems. Science could be a weapon when properly applied. "Attention coalition vessel," Lisa transmitted over standard communication channels. "You are carrying supplies to military installations that participated in the New Geneva massacre. Prepare to be boarded." Captain Vex stared at his communication officer in disbelief. Human forces were not supposed to be operating this deep in coalition space. Intelligence reports indicated that surviving human fleets were scattered and demoralized, barely capable of defending their remaining colonies. Yet here was a human ship threatening his cargo run in what should have been completely secure territory. "Impossible," Vex muttered as he activated his ship's defensive systems. The Endless Bounty was not a warship, but it carried enough weapons to deal with pirates and raiders. The human vessel was outnumbered and outgunned by any reasonable measure The engagement lasted exactly 37 seconds. Lisa's ship moved with the precision of a scalpel, targeting specific systems with weapons that had been designed to exploit weaknesses in Coalition technology. The freighter shields collapsed under electromagnetic pulses calibrated to their exact frequency. Their weapons overloaded when human viruses convinced their targeting computers to fire at their own ship. Their engines died as specialized projectiles severed power conduits with surgical accuracy when the endless Bounty drifted helpless in space. Lisa began the boarding operation. Her crew of 8 humans moved through the alien ship like antibodies attacking an infection, using their knowledge of Coalition biology to incapacitate resistance without causing unnecessary casualties. They were not here to murder civilians but to send a message. The cargo hold contained exactly what intelligence had predicted: medical supplies destined for Coalition military bases, industrial equipment for weapons manufacturing and communication, devices that would help coordinate future attacks on human colonies. Every item was carefully documented before being jettisoned into space. Lisa stood in the freighter's bridge, studying the terrified alien crew who had been secured but not harmed. Captain Vex looked at her with the confusion of someone whose universe had suddenly stopped making sense. "Why?" he asked through the translation device. "We are civilians carrying medical supplies. What threat do we pose to your people?" Lisa's response was delivered with the calm precision of a scientist explaining experimental results. "These supplies will reach Coalition military installations within 72 hours. Those same installations participated in the bombardment of New Geneva, where 3 million human civilians were murdered. Your cargo extends the operational capacity of forces actively engaged in genocide." The alien captain's mandibles clicked nervously. "But we are not soldiers. We did not attack your world." "Neither were the children who died on New Geneva," Lisa replied without emotion. "You are part of a supply chain that enables mass murder. That makes you a legitimate target according to the rules of war that your own military established." Lisa transmitted the boarding footage to human forces throughout Coalition space, along with detailed intelligence about Coalition supply operations. Similar intercepts were happening across dozens of systems as humanity's dispersed fleet demonstrated that no alien cargo run was safe from human attention. The attacks followed patterns that Coalition commanders struggled to understand. Human forces targeted supply ships rather than military vessels, communication relays instead of battleships, and industrial facilities rather than fortified positions. They were systematically disrupting the logistics that kept Coalition forces operational while avoiding direct confrontation with superior firepower. Commander Beth Williams piloted her converted mining ship through the Vega system, hunting Coalition communication satellites with the patience of someone who understood that wars were won through information as much as firepower. Her vessel had once extracted minerals from asteroid fields, but now it extracted intelligence from enemy communication networks. The satellites died silently, their systems corrupted by human viruses that had been designed specifically to exploit Coalition software vulnerabilities. Each destroyed relay created gaps in enemy communication coverage, forcing Coalition forces to rely on less secure channels that human intelligence could monitor and manipulate. Beth's crew included former computer programmers, electronics technicians, and systems analysts who had learned to wage war through information warfare rather than brute force. They understood that modern military forces depended on communication networks, and networks could be turned into weapons when properly attacked. The psychological impact proved as devastating as the physical destruction. Coalition crews began REPORTNG equipment failures at critical moments, sensor readings that showed human ships where none existed, and communication systems that broadcast false orders from their own command structure. Fear spread through alien ranks as they realized their own technology could not be trusted. On his flagship above Corvin Prime, Admiral Rex studied intelligence reports that painted a picture of systematic infrastructure collapse. Human raids were occurring throughout Coalition space with perfect coordination, yet his forces could find no trace of human command centers, supply bases, or fleet concentrations. They are everywhere and nowhere, his intelligence officer reported with obvious frustration. Our patrol ships find evidence of human activity but never encounter human forces directly. They strike and vanish like phantoms. Rex understood what his subordinates could not accept. Humans were not fighting like a conventional military force, but like an immune system responding to infection. They had dispersed throughout Coalition space in small groups that struck critical targets. Before disappearing into the vast emptiness between stars, most disturbing were reports of human technical capabilities that exceeded anything in Coalition databases. The aliens were discovering that humans could operate Coalition equipment better than its original designers, exploit vulnerabilities that Coalition engineers had never detected, and modify captured technology in ways that dramatically improved its performance. Dr. Lisa Park returned to her hidden base in an abandoned mining facility, carrying intelligence gathered from dozens of intercepted cargo ships. The information revealed Coalition supply schedules, military deployment patterns, and communication protocols that would enable even more effective attacks. The base bustled with quiet activity as human specialists analyzed captured data and planned their next operations. Former scientists worked alongside career military personnel, united by shared grief and common purpose. They had become something new, not quite soldiers, not quite researchers, but utterly committed to making Coalition forces pay for their crimes through systematic disruption. Supply convoys to the Centauri sector have been rerouted, reported Mike, a former software engineer whose programs now crashed Coalition computer systems with elegant precision. They are concentrating their logistics through better defended routes, Lisa nodded with professional satisfaction. Concentration meant predictability, and predictability meant vulnerability. The Coalition was responding to human tactics exactly as psychological profiles had predicted, making themselves easier to track while believing they were improving their security. Coalition forces throughout their empire were learning that humans fought wars like scientists conducting experiments. Every attack gathered data, every success revealed new opportunities, and every failure taught lessons that improved future operations. The aliens had awakened something far more dangerous than an angry military. They had provoked a species that treated warfare as an intellectual challenge, to be solved through systematic application of superior knowledge. The outer rim of the Vex system registered energy signatures that should have been impossible. Sensors designed to detect individual starships were being overwhelmed by readings that suggested entire fleets, more massive than anything in recorded galactic history. The Coalition Defense Coordinator stared at his displays in disbelief, certain that his equipment was malfunctioning. He was wrong. Humanity's death fleet was coming, and it was larger than nightmares. Admiral Kate Morrison stood in the command center of her flagship Retribution, watching as human vessels dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. The ship around her was not just a warship, but a mobile fortress that dwarfed anything the Coalition had ever constructed. Its manufacturing bays were already producing replacement fighters, while its agricultural decks grew food for the crew. The Retribution was a city in space, built for one purpose: the complete destruction of humanity's enemies. Around her flagship, thousands of other vessels materialized from the void. Battleships that had been constructed in hidden shipyards throughout human space, their hulls bearing the names of destroyed colonies. Carrier groups that launched clouds of fighters like angry wasps from a disturbed nest. Support vessels that turned asteroids into ammunition and cosmic dust into fuel. This was not the hastily assembled defense force the Coalition expected. This was the product of humanity's industrial capacity operating at full war production for 3 months. Every human world had contributed ships, weapons, and crew members driven by shared grief and unified purpose. Kate studied the tactical displays showing Coalition forces throughout the Vex system. Their military base on Vex Major was considered impregnable, protected by overlapping shield generators and orbital defense platforms. The planet housed 2 million Coalition military personnel and enough firepower to destroy any conventional fleet. All units, this is Fleet Command, Kate announced over the tactical network. You know what they did to New Geneva? You know why we are here. Show them what humans do to those who murder children. The response came from 5,000 ships simultaneously. Remember New Geneva? The coalition defense coordinator on Vex. Major finally accepted that his sensors were functioning perfectly. The impossible was happening. Humanity had assembled a fleet that outnumbered coalition forces in the system by 10 to 1. Every ship was broadcasting identification signals that told a story of systematic preparation and absolute commitment to victory. He activated the planetary defense systems and sent desperate messages, calling for reinforcements from across coalition. Space. The automated defenses came online with devastating firepower, creating kill zones that should have stopped any assault. Missile batteries loaded with antimatter warheads, prepared to turn space into a death trap for approaching enemies. The human fleet spread out in a formation that seemed to fill the entire star system. They moved with the precision of a machine, each ship maintaining perfect position relative to its neighbors. There was no wasted motion, no hesitation, no sign of the confusion that marked inexperienced forces. Kate watched the enemy preparations with the calm satisfaction of a chess master who could see 20 moves into the future. Coalition tactics relied on concentrated firepower from fixed positions, exactly the strategy that human forces had spent months learning to counter. Their enemies were about to discover that 3 months of guerrilla warfare had been education, not desperation. Begin Phase 1, she ordered. The first wave of human attack was not ships but information. Electronic warfare specialists, many of whom had been computer programmers before the war, launched coordinated cyber attacks against coalition systems. Vex Major's defense network began receiving contradictory orders, friendly fire protocols, activated randomly, and communication channels filled with interference. Coalition commanders found themselves fighting their own equipment as human viruses, spread through their networks like digital plague. Shield generators fluctuated unpredictably, missile batteries targeted each other, and orbital platforms broadcast false sensor readings that showed human ships where none existed. The second wave was physical destruction delivered with surgical precision. Human bomber squadrons, flying ships that had been cargo haulers months before, approached Vex Major from vectors that avoided the confused defense systems. Their payloads were not conventional explosives, but specialized weapons designed to exploit specific weaknesses in coalition technology. The orbital defense platforms died quietly, their reactors overloading from electromagnetic pulses that had been calibrated to coalition power systems. The great shield generators that protected the planet's surface collapsed as their control circuits received signals that convinced them to shut down voluntarily. The impregnable fortress became defenseless. In minutes, Kate permitted herself a small smile as she watched the enemy defenses crumble. Human intelligence had spent 3 months capturing and analyzing coalition technology, learning every specification and vulnerability. The weapons now destroying Vex Major had been designed specifically to kill coalition equipment with minimum wasted effort. Phase 2 authorized, she announced. The main human fleet began its advance toward the now naked planet. Coalition ships rose from surface bases to meet them, their crews brave but doomed. The aliens still thought in terms of traditional fleet engagement, expecting to fight a battle between equals where superior numbers and firepower would determine victory. They discovered instead that humans had redefined the concept of overwhelming force. The coalition task force numbered 200 vessels of various classes, all equipped with advanced weaponry and experienced crews. They had fought dozens of battles across the galaxy and considered themselves among the finest warriors in known space. Their formation was textbook perfect, their tactics were proven effective, and their confidence was absolute. The human response was 5,000 ships that fired simultaneously. The coalition force ceased to exist in the span of 30 seconds. There was no glorious battle, no heroic last stands, no opportunity for tactical brilliance. The aliens simply died under a volume of fire so intense that their shields, armor, and hulls were vaporized before they could return a single shot. Kate watched the brief engagement with professional satisfaction. Overwhelming force applied with perfect timing had achieved victory without significant human casualties. This was warfare as engineering problem. Identify the enemy's capabilities, exceed them by an order of magnitude, and apply superior resources. At the decisive point, the final phase began as human landing craft descended toward the X-Major surface. The planet that had served as a coalition military stronghold was about to become an object lesson in what happened to enemies of humanity. 2 million coalition personnel waited in bunkers and fortifications, preparing for a siege that would never come. Instead, they faced something much worse: humans who had learned to wage war with scientific precision and unlimited resources. The Marines who landed on the X-Major were not just soldiers but graduates of a 3-month intensive course in coalition weaknesses. They knew exactly how alien equipment functioned, precisely where enemy positions were located, and specifically which tactics would cause maximum psychological damage. The battle for the X-Major lasted 18 hours. When it ended, coalition military power in the sector had been completely eliminated. Every base was destroyed, every ship was debris, and every fortification was a crater. The planet that had been a symbol of coalition strength became proof of human superiority. As her fleet prepared to move toward the next target, Kate received a priority transmission from Coalition High Command. Admiral Rex himself appeared on her screen, his reptilian features twisted with desperate rage. "You dare attack our core systems?" he hissed through the translation device. "We will mobilize every ship in Coalition space to stop this madness." Kate's response was delivered in the same emotionless tone she had used throughout the battle. "You showed us what you consider warfare when you murdered 3 million civilians. Now we will show you what humans consider justice. There will be no negotiation, no surrender, and no mercy. Your people will learn the price of making humans angry." The transmission ended, leaving Rex staring at a blank screen. Around him, his staff worked frantically to coordinate reinforcements from across Coalition space. They still believed that superior numbers could stop the human advance, that conventional tactics could defeat this unprecedented threat. They were about to learn that humanity's death fleet was not just larger than expected, but utterly unlike anything they had ever faced. The Iron Storm was just beginning, and before it ended, entire worlds would burn. The refugee ships fleeing Corvan 3 carried more than displaced civilians. They carried the terror of a species that had finally understood what humans were capable of when pushed beyond all reasonable limits. The survivors' stories spread across Coalition space like wildfire: cities that vanished in minutes, defenses that crumbled like paper, and human soldiers who fought with the methodical precision of machines designed for killing. General Tom Anderson had been a logistics coordinator before New Geneva, responsible for ensuring human colonies received supplies on schedule. His expertise in supply chain management had made him an unlikely choice to lead ground operations, but war had taught humanity to value practical skills over traditional military experience. He understood how systems worked, how they could be broken, and how to rebuild them for different purposes. Now he stood in the ruins of Coven III's capital city, watching his engineers convert coalition infrastructure into weapons of human design. The planet that had served as the industrial heart of the enemy empire was being systematically dismantled and reassembled according to human specifications. Every factory, every power plant, and every communication facility would soon serve humanity's war effort. Tom's forces had landed on Corvan 3, expecting fierce resistance from 200,000 coalition troops entrenched in prepared positions. Instead, they had found demoralized aliens whose equipment failed at critical moments, whose communications were jammed by their own systems, and whose leaders received contradictory orders from networks they thought were secure. The battle had been less a conflict than a demonstration of applied engineering principles. Human forces had spent months learning how coalition technology functioned, then designed specific countermeasures for every system. When the invasion began, enemy tanks would not start, aircraft fell from the sky, and weapon systems fired once before overloading their own power supplies. "Status report from Sector 7, Tom requested from his field commander. A former construction foreman named Bob, who had learned military tactics with the same methodical approach he had once used to build skyscrapers. Resistance pockets eliminated, Bob reported without emotion. Industrial complex secured and conversion proceeding on schedule. Estimated time to full production, 6 days. Tom nodded with satisfaction. Corvin 3 had been the Coalition's primary weapons manufacturing center, producing the advanced technology that had made their forces seem invincible. Within a week, those same facilities would be building human equipment using principles that alien engineers had never imagined. The conversion process was proceeding across the entire planet. Human specialists were reverse engineering Coalition technology and improving it with innovations born from 3 months of intensive warfare research. Manufacturing techniques that had taken the aliens centuries to develop were being perfected by humans in days. Coalition prisoners watched in stunned silence as their captors demonstrated capabilities that seemed impossible. Human soldiers operated alien equipment better than its original designers, fixed problems that Coalition engineers had considered unsolvable, and modified systems in ways that dramatically improved their performance. The psychological impact was devastating. Coalition forces had based their entire military strategy on technological superiority, believing their advanced weapons and equipment made them invincible against primitive human forces. Watching humans not only master their technology, but improve upon it shattered their confidence in ways that mere defeat never could. Tom received regular reports from similar operations throughout Coalition space. Human forces were not simply conquering enemy territory, but transforming it into extensions of human industrial capacity. Every captured world became a manufacturing center. Every defeated fleet became raw materials, and every prisoner became an unwilling teacher of Coalition technology. The strategic implications were staggering. Humanity's war machine was not just maintaining its strength but growing stronger with every victory. Coalition forces found themselves fighting enemies who used their own weapons against them, operated their own equipment better than they could, and understood their tactics well enough to counter them perfectly. On the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Rex studied intelligence reports that painted an impossible picture. Human forces were advancing on multiple fronts simultaneously, showing no signs of the supply problems or communication delays that should have affected such a dispersed campaign. Their coordination was perfect, their equipment was superior, and their tactics were unlike anything in Coalition military doctrine. How are they supplying this offensive? Rex demanded of his intelligence staff. Their industrial base should not be capable of supporting operations on this scale. His chief analyst, a crystalline being whose species had evolved pure logic as their primary survival trait, provided the answer that Rex did not want to hear. They are not supplying it from their original territory, Admiral. Every world they capture becomes a supply base. Every facility they seize becomes a manufacturing center. They are literally growing stronger as they advance. Rex stared at the tactical display showing human advances across Coalition space. The red arrows indicating enemy movements formed a pattern that resembled a cancer spreading through healthy tissue. Each conquered system became a node in an expanding network of human industrial capacity. The Coalition's military leadership had planned for a conventional war where enemy forces would gradually weaken as they moved further from their supply bases. Instead, they faced an opponent whose strength increased with every victory, whose equipment improved with every captured facility, and whose understanding of Coalition weaknesses grew more perfect with every engagement. Tom's communication array crackled with a priority transmission from Admiral Kate Morrison aboard the Retribution. Her image appeared on his field command screen, showing the sterile bridge environment where humanity's military leadership coordinated their systematic dismantling of Coalition power. General Anderson, what is your assessment of conversion operations? Kate asked in the emotionless tone that had become characteristic of human military communications since New Geneva. Ahead of schedule on all fronts, Tom reported with professional satisfaction. Corvin 3's industrial capacity will exceed original Coalition output within 2 weeks. Modification of captured equipment is proving more effective than anticipated. Kate nodded with the same mechanical precision that marked all human military operations. Excellent. Phase 4 is authorized. Begin preparation for the final advance. On Coalition core systems. Tom understood the implications immediately. Phase 4 meant no more strategic objectives, no more tactical considerations, and no more concern for collateral damage. The systematic dismantling of Coalition military power was complete. What came next would be total war against an entire civilization. The Coalition had wanted to teach humanity about power through the destruction of New Geneva. They had succeeded beyond their wildest imagination, but the lesson had transformed their students into something far more dangerous than they had ever intended to create. Human forces across Coalition space received the same authorization simultaneously. The final phase of humanity's educational process was about to begin, and when it ended, the galaxy would understand that some lessons could only be taught through absolute destruction. Coalition refugees fleeing toward their home systems carried one message above all others: humans were no longer fighting to defend their territory or protect their people. They were fighting to demonstrate what happened to species that mistook human mercy for human weakness. The demonstration was nearly complete, and the final examination would be graded in blood and fire across every Coalition world. There would be no partial credit for good intentions, no extra time for late submissions, and no appeals process for those who failed to learn. Class would remain in session until every alien in Coalition space understood exactly what they had awakened when they chose to murder human children. The space around Corvin Prime had become a graveyard of ambition. Destroyed Coalition fleets drifted in expanding clouds of debris, their wreckage forming rings around the planet like a monument to imperial hubris. What had once been the most heavily defended world in known space was now surrounded by evidence of humanity's absolute superiority in the art of systematic destruction. Admiral Kate Morrison studied the final target from her command chair aboard the Retribution. Corvin Prime floated before her fleet like a jewel waiting to be crushed, its surface cities glowing with the desperate activity of a civilization facing extinction. 2 billion Coalition citizens lived on the planet below, including the political and military leadership that had ordered New Geneva's destruction. They were about to learn that some crimes carried consequences that transcended individual guilt or innocence. Kate's death fleet filled the star system with overwhelming force. 10,000 human vessels had converged on Corvin Prime from every direction, creating a blockade so complete that not even light could escape without human permission. The formation was perfect, the discipline absolute, and the intent unmistakable. Final communication from Coalition leadership, reported her communications officer. A former teacher named David, who had learned to coordinate military networks with the same precision he had once used to manage. Classroom discussions. Admiral Rex appeared on the main screen, his reptilian features showing the strain of watching his empire die ship by ship, world by world. Behind him, the Coalition High Command worked frantically at their consoles, launching communication drones and broadcasting surrender offers on all frequencies. Admiral Morrison, Rex began, his voice carrying the weight of absolute defeat. The Coalition formally surrenders. We acknowledge human supremacy and offer complete capitulation. There is no need for further destruction. Kate's response was delivered in the same emotionless tone she had maintained throughout the war. You had the opportunity to avoid this outcome when you chose to target civilian populations. Your surrender is noted but irrelevant. This is not conquest. This is education, the transmission continued with mechanical precision. You wanted to teach humanity about power through the murder of innocents. The lesson you will now receive is what humans consider proportional response. There will be no negotiation, no clemency, and no survivors to carry tales of Coalition mercy. Rex's image flickered as human electronic warfare systems began overriding Coalition communication networks. His final words were barely audible through the interference. What have we done? Kate cut the transmission and addressed her fleet through the tactical network. Her words reached every human vessel simultaneously, spoken by 10,000 captains to crews who had spent months preparing for this moment. Citizens of the galaxy, you are witnessing the conclusion of humanity's educational program, she announced. The species that chose to demonstrate power through child murder will now learn what actual power looks like when properly applied. The bombardment began with mathematical precision. Human weapons refined through months of warfare and enhanced with captured Coalition technology, struck Corvin Prime's surface with coordinated devastation. Each shot was calculated to maximize destruction, while ensuring the planet's agony would be visible throughout the galaxy. The capital city where Rex had planned New Geneva's destruction disappeared in a pillar of fire that reached into the upper atmosphere. Government buildings, military installations, and population centers vanished under weapons that turned matter into energy with perfect efficiency. The bombardment was not random destruction, but surgical removal of an entire civilization. Coalition defense systems activated automatically, launching missile salvos and energy beams that should have inflicted terrible damage on any attacking fleet. Instead, they discovered that human electronic warfare had convinced their own weapons to target empty space while broadcasting false success. Confirmations to their operators. Kate watched the planet die with the satisfaction of an engineer whose calculations had proven correct. Humanity's industrial capacity, enhanced by captured Coalition facilities, had produced weapons that exceeded anything in galactic history. The Death Fleet surrounding Corvin Prime carried enough firepower to sterilize entire star systems, all of it focused on teaching one final lesson. The destruction continued for 6 hours. BROADCAS to live throughout Coalition space and beyond. Alien species across the galaxy watched as humanity demonstrated the difference between military superiority and absolute dominance. Every Coalition world received the transmission, every neutral system monitored the frequencies, and every potential enemy observed what happened to those who underestimated human capabilities. The planet's surface transformed from a collection of gleaming cities into a molten wasteland that glowed with radioactive fire. 2 billion Coalition citizens died not as soldiers in glorious battle, but as civilians in systematic extermination. The irony was deliberate and inescapable. They experienced exactly what they had inflicted upon New Geneva, magnified by the mathematical precision of human revenge. As the bombardment neared completion, Kate transmitted humanity's final message to the galaxy. Her words were broadcast on every frequency, translated into every known language, and recorded for posterity by civilizations that had never heard of Earth or New Geneva. Let this serve as permanent reminder to all who observe, she announced, with the authority of absolute victory. Humanity sought peaceful coexistence and received child murder in response. We offered diplomacy and were answered with genocide. The species responsible for this choice no longer exists because they mistook human restraint for human weakness. The transmission continued with mathematical certainty. Any civilization that threatens human civilians will receive identical education. There will be no warnings, no second chances, and no mercy for those who confuse our previous tolerance. With inability, we are not conquerors seeking territory. We are teachers ensuring comprehension. The final phase of Corvin Prime's destruction began as human engineering teams activated specialized devices that had been deployed throughout the bombardment. The planet's core was destabilized through controlled fusion reactions that would continue for millennia, ensuring that the world would serve as a permanent beacon of human displeasure. The death of Corvin Prime sent shockwaves throughout known space that had nothing to do with the planet's physical destruction. Within hours, neutral species began broadcasting friendship declarations to human space. Former Coalition allies announced their immediate withdrawal from all military agreements. Potential threats reconsidered their expansion plans and decided that other directions might prove more profitable. Kate received surrender transmissions from Coalition remnants across dozens of systems. Military commanders who had never met, humans offered unconditional capitulation. Civilian populations broadcast desperate pleas for mercy. Industrial centers shut down their weapons production and began manufacturing humanitarian supplies in hopes of avoiding Coven Prime's fate. The response was uniform and terrifying in its simplicity. Humanity had no interest in ruling alien populations or occupying foreign territory. They had come to deliver education, and the lesson was now complete. Coalition space was left as empty. Ruins and radioactive monuments. A classroom where other species could study the consequences of underestimating human determination. Tom Bradley stood in the ashes of New Geneva 3 months after returning to his destroyed homeworld. The human fleet had completed its circuit of destruction and returned to the colony where their war had begun. He was no longer alone among the ruins. Human settlers were arriving daily to rebuild what had been lost and to establish a memorial that would remind future generations why vigilance mattered. The memorial was simple, a wall bearing 3 million names and a single inscription. That had become humanity's new motto. They chose to teach us about power. We chose to teach them about consequences. Tom looked up at the sky where human patrol ships maintained constant watch. The Death Fleet had not disbanded after Corvan Prime's destruction, but had evolved into a permanent guardian force that ensured no alien species would mistake human reconstruction efforts for renewed vulnerability. The galaxy had learned that humans were dangerous when peaceful, but absolutely deadly when provoked. More importantly, it had learned that human memory was perfect and human patience was infinite. There would be no forgetting New Geneva, no forgiving the Coalition's choice, and no second chances for species that confused human mercy with human weakness. Admiral Kate Morrison remained in command of humanity's military forces, but her role had changed from wartime leader to permanent teacher. Her ships patrolled the borders of human space and beyond, carrying a simple message to any civilization that might consider testing human resolve. The classroom was always open. The curriculum was unchanging, and graduation required complete understanding of humanity's capacity for measured response. The Death Fleet's journey home was marked by a galaxy-wide silence that spoke louder than any victory celebration. Alien species watched the human ships pass through their territory, without interference, offering supplies and assistance that were politely declined. The universal message was clear: humanity required nothing from other species, except the understanding that certain lessons were permanent. As the fleet reached Earth's solar system, Kate transmitted her final report to human leadership. The war that had begun with 3 million murders had ended with the complete elimination of the responsible civilization and the education of every remaining species in known space. Mission accomplished. She reported with the same emotionless precision that had characterized human military communications throughout the conflict. The galaxy now understands the difference between human restraint and human inability. Future conflicts will be avoided through comprehension rather than deterrence. The human fleet settled into permanent patrol patterns around human space, their presence a constant reminder that some species had evolved beyond the need for conquest, but retained the capacity for absolute destruction when circumstances required it. They were teachers now, guardians of a lesson that had been written in fire across 100 worlds. The Coalition was gone, existing only in historical records and radioactive craters that would glow for 10,000 years. Their empire had been erased not through conquest but through education, a demonstration of what happened when advanced civilizations mistook human civilization for human weakness. Other species studied the ruins and learned the intended lesson. Humans were perfectly willing to coexist peacefully with their neighbors, but they defined peace as the absence of threats to human civilians. Any violation of this simple principle would result in immediate and comprehensive instruction in the practical application of human military science. The age of human expansion resumed, but it proceeded with a new understanding throughout the galaxy. Human colony ships traveled under the protection of escort fleets that no rational species would consider challenging. Human diplomats negotiated from positions of absolute strength backed by proven capability. Human merchants traded in markets where their safety was guaranteed by universal recognition of what happened to those who threatened human lives. New Geneva was rebuilt as a monument to both loss and recovery, its cities rising from ashes that had been watered with alien blood. The 3 million names on the memorial wall served as permanent reminder that human patience had limits. Human memory was perfect, and human education was thorough enough to ensure that certain mistakes were never repeated. The galaxy had learned its lesson well. In the end, that was all humanity had ever wanted to teach.